I didn't expect to find her there, of all places, sitting in my car like it belonged to her, my jacket draped over her shoulders, soft and slightly rumpled. The moment I saw her, everything else, the dull hum of the street, the late evening air, the smell of gasoline and wet asphalt, faded into the background. She looked up, calm but not unreadable. There was that tilt of her head, just enough to suggest curiosity, amusement, maybe even something deeper. Her eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, met mine, and suddenly I felt like every thought I'd ever tried to hide was laid bare. She was graceful in the way she leaned back in the passenger seat, one leg tucked beneath her, the jacket slipping slightly off her shoulder. It should have been casual, almost careless, but it wasn't. Nothing about her was careless. "I didn't expect anyone here," I said, trying to keep my voice even, though my pulse had doubled, maybe tripled. Her lips curved into a small, almost secretive smile. "I like to surprise people," she said softly, but there was an edge to it, a quiet authority that made it impossible to look away. She brushed her hand against mine as she adjusted her jacket. It was accidental, too accidental to be true. I felt the warmth linger, like a whisper against my skin, and I kept my hand there, just barely, longer than I should have. My chest tightened. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, something warm, almost like vanilla mixed with smoke, and it rooted me to that moment. I couldn't breathe right, not because I was afraid, but because being this close to her was more than I was used to. She had this way of existing that made everything else, the city, the noise, the cold glass of my windshield, irrelevant. "You've been busy," I said, more to fill the silence than because it was true. She raised an eyebrow, a tiny crease forming between her brows, and I realized she wasn't fooled. She rarely was. Her eyes flicked to my jacket, the one she was wearing. "It smells like you," she murmured, her voice lower now, careful, intimate in a way that made me swallow. That single statement, simple as it was, felt like the air had thickened between us. Words didn't need to do more work when a glance could carry the weight of unspoken questions, lingering desire, and 1,000 half-said thoughts. I shifted in the driver's seat, trying not to let the car feel too small, trying not to let the closeness I craved show. My fingers tapped against the steering wheel, my heart tapped faster against my ribs. She leaned just a little closer, enough that I could feel the subtle heat radiating from her. My mouth went dry, and I realized I hadn't noticed it before, how much I wanted to hear her breathe, how much I wanted to reach for her without asking. She tilted her chin up, and for a moment I thought she might say something, lean even closer, but then the car door creaked. Someone was at the edge of the lot. Her eyes darted to the sound, a flicker of something almost like alarm, or was it disappointment, crossing her features. I held my breath. My hand, still near hers, twitched. She didn't move away, didn't let go. Our eyes locked again, longer, heavier, and suddenly everything felt suspended, like the world had decided to pause just for this instant. Then the door opened, a shadow spilling into the interior of the car, and the tension that had been simmering, almost unbearable, pulled tight into a single, sharp line. I swallowed. She glanced at me, one eyebrow raised, a question unspoken but entirely understood. And I knew, before I even spoke, that nothing would ever be the same. We stayed in the car longer than either of us had any reason to. Outside, the street was nearly empty, the sky a dull gray smear of late evening. Inside, the air had thickened, and every small movement between us felt magnified. I shouldn't. I started, fumbling with the keys. "I didn't expect you to actually," she smiled, slow and knowing, and interrupted without words. Her gaze lingered on my hands, on the way I fidgeted. "You're nervous," she said softly, almost teasing. But there was no judgment in her voice, only a quiet recognition. I swallowed, trying to hide the truth. I was nervous, more than I'd admit, even to myself. She always seemed to notice everything. It was part of why I liked her, and part of why it was so impossible. She was older, experienced, the kind of person who had seen the world and all its complications. Me? I was still figuring out which risks were worth taking. I remembered the first time I'd met her, months ago, at a friend's dinner party. She'd walked in with effortless confidence, a quiet magnetism that drew attention without trying. I hadn't known anyone like her. Back then, she had laughed at a joke I hadn't made well, and I had almost embarrassed myself in front of her, and yet she had smiled in a way that made it feel like maybe I hadn't failed completely. That memory was a little ache I carried, proof that some people could leave marks without touching. She cleared her throat, a small sound that drew my attention back to the present. "You drive a lot, don't you?" she asked, the jacket slipping slightly as she adjusted her position. Her hand brushed the edge of the steering wheel near mine, almost incidental, but I felt the spark anyway. "Yeah," I said, my voice too low. "Long hours. Mostly alone. Helps me think." She didn't press further, only nodded, leaning slightly closer to read something on the dashboard, or maybe to give herself an excuse to be nearer. Her shoulder grazed mine, and I didn't move. I could feel her breath, faint against my neck as she shifted. My stomach tightened. I wanted to ask her why she was here, why she had come to my car alone. But the question hovered too close to something personal, and I hesitated. Instead, I said, You never talk much about yourself." Her eyes flicked up, holding mine a second too long. "Not much to say that's worth hearing," she replied, almost too easily, yet I caught the ghost of something behind it, maybe loneliness, maybe regret. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the jacket for a moment before releasing it. There it was again, the pull I couldn't name, the risk, the impossibility. Her age, her grace, my fumbling youth. The world would judge us if it knew, or maybe we'd even judge ourselves. And yet, every look, every brush of skin, seemed to erase all logic. I laughed quietly, a little bitterly, to mask the tension. "Sounds like we're both hiding, then." She didn't answer immediately, only let her hand linger near mine on the console. I felt her warmth, the subtle vibration of her pulse, and I wondered if she could feel mine too. Our fingers weren't touching yet, but it was close enough. Close enough to ignite something that neither of us could name aloud. Finally, she spoke, her voice almost a whisper, "Maybe, hiding isn't always the worst thing." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the walls she kept so carefully built seemed to shimmer, almost crumble. I wanted to reach for her, to brush that hair from her face, to close the small distance, but I didn't. Instead, I let my hand hover, caught between desire and restraint. She shifted closer without moving, a subtle, magnetic gravity that made the air around us electric. The moment stretched, taut and fragile, until she leaned her shoulder ever so slightly against mine. Just that touch, but it felt like a promise we hadn't spoken, a quiet acknowledgement that we were both drawn to something forbidden, impossible, and irresistible. Then she pulled back just a little, enough to remind me that we were still navigating this tension, still testing boundaries. But her eyes never left mine, and in that glance, I could see the acknowledgement of what neither of us dared to say: this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Outside, a car passed slowly, its headlights washing the interior in white light. Inside, the silence between us was louder than any words. And I realized, with a thrum of both fear and anticipation, that something had shifted. Something delicate, intimate, and undeniably real. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I couldn't look away. I was just about to tell her something I'd rehearsed in my head 100 times, when my phone buzzed on the dashboard. The screen lit up with a group message from a friend I barely remembered inviting me to brunch last week. I glanced at it, annoyed, and then looked back at her. She had tilted her head, that subtle question in her gaze, watching me check my phone. I tried to smile casually, but my fingers trembled slightly against the device. She noticed, of course. She always noticed. "Someone's interrupting us," she said, voice low, teasing, yet edged with something sharp. "Yeah," I muttered, sliding the phone back into its slot. Friends, obligations. She leaned in, closer than before, and I could feel her breath, a soft, warm brush against my cheek. My pulse kicked up, fast, and I realized just how dangerously close we were. Her jacket smelled faintly of smoke and vanilla, and I couldn't stop imagining it pressed against me. For a second, I wanted to reach for her hand. I wanted to see if she wanted me to. But I froze. Guilt stabbed me. This was reckless, forbidden in 1,000 quiet ways. Social expectations, her life, my own indecisiveness, they all whispered at me, warning me back. Her lips parted slightly as if she might speak, or perhaps ask me something she didn't dare. Our faces were only inches apart, and the tension vibrated between us in silent, palpable waves. I could feel the heat from her shoulder against mine, the faint tremor in her hand brushing the steering wheel. A sudden sound, a car door slamming outside, made both of us jump. I cursed under my breath and glanced toward the window. Nothing. Just someone leaving, disappearing into the night. We laughed softly, awkwardly, a little too loud for the empty street. And then our eyes met again. Longer. Harder. There was something in that gaze, something neither of us wanted to name aloud yet. I found myself leaning just a fraction closer, not realizing until her hand lightly brushed my forearm. It was accidental, or maybe it wasn't, but it sent a jolt through me. My breath hitched. Her eyes flicked down, following the motion, and then back up, holding mine like a secret. I shouldn't, I began, my voice catching. I stopped, realizing she already understood the words I couldn't finish. She gave me a look that made my stomach twist, a mix of amusement, caution, and undeniable desire. She leaned even closer, and I could feel her heart beat against my side, fast, urgent. My own pulse thundered in response. I wanted to close the last inch between us, to let my lips brush hers, but fear held me back. Fear of judgment, fear of ruin, fear of breaking some invisible rule neither of us had named. Instead, we stayed there, suspended in a near kiss, a heartbeat from confession. Every small movement, her hand brushing my arm, my shoulder nudging hers, was amplified in the quiet of the car. Every breath seemed impossibly loud. She started, then faltered. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and my own words died before they left my mouth. The moment stretched until it almost hurt. I wanted to say something, anything, but the weight of our unspoken tension pressed down, leaving only our proximity. She tilted her face toward me, eyes soft, vulnerable, daring. I could smell her hair, feel the warmth of her neck so close I almost couldn't bear it. And then she shifted just slightly, pressing a little more of herself against me, not fully, but enough that my restraint started to crumble. My hands hovered, trembling, and I realized I had never wanted someone this much, while knowing I probably shouldn't. We sat there, closer than ever, neither of us moving, both of us resisting, and neither of us able to look away. The night outside felt endless, the car a universe of its own. And in that suspended space, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: no matter how hard we tried to resist, we were already pulled into each other's orbit. The silence between us had grown heavy enough to press against my chest. I could feel it in my bones, in the heat of her body so close, so impossibly near. My fingers itched to reach for her, to trace the line of her jaw, to pull her closer, but every rational thought screamed at me to stop. Her eyes caught mine, dark and unguarded for the first time. Something flickered there, a mixture of daring and fear, longing and caution, that made my pulse slam. She leaned forward slightly, and I smelled the faint hint of her perfume, stronger now, mingled with the warmth of her skin. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked, a soft, embarrassed rasp. "I can't keep pretending I don't notice," I admitted, my words barely audible. The confession tumbled out before I could second-guess them. She froze, and then her hand moved almost imperceptibly toward my arm. Just a brush, a featherlight contact, but it set off a chain reaction in me I couldn't stop. My chest tightened. I wanted to lean in, to close the gap, to let the world vanish around us. But fear clawed at the edges, fear of judgment, of mistake, of crossing lines that maybe should remain untouched. "You shouldn't," she whispered back, her voice low, shaking just slightly. Her shoulder brushed mine as she shifted, and I felt the tremor of her breath against my neck. My hands itched to move, to cup her face, to pull her hair back behind her ear. Every microgesture was amplified, the slight tilt of her head, the way her lashes rested against her cheeks, the faint tremble of her lips. "I don't care," I said, barely daring to breathe. My hand hovered near her hair, frozen between restraint and impulse. I can't stop thinking about you." Her eyes softened, searching mine, and the tension broke slightly into a fragile, dangerous vulnerability. "You're reckless," she said, but the edge of her words was teasing, almost a dare. I shifted closer, careful, every nerve alight. My fingers finally found their courage, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her skin was warm under my touch, softer than I'd imagined. She didn't pull back. She leaned slightly, just enough that our faces were inches apart. My breath hitched. Her lips glistened in the dim light, and I felt my own heart hammering against my ribs. I wanted to close the last inch, to bridge the gap between desire and action, but the world, outside and inside my head, screamed at me to wait. "I shouldn't," I started again, my voice low, trembling with both restraint and need. She shook her head, a tiny, imperceptible movement, leaning just enough that the scent of her hair filled my senses. "No," she whispered. "Don't." Her hand brushed mine, deliberately this time, holding it in place. The contact was electric, a spark that made every muscle in me tense. The silence stretched, taut and fragile, until it felt as though the next breath, or the next heartbeat, would tip everything over the edge. I leaned closer anyway, the space between us shrinking with every millimeter, every stolen, hesitant motion. My lips hovered just a whisper from hers. I could feel her breath on my skin, the tremble of her chest against my arm. The moment was suspended, trembling, impossible. And then she spoke, her voice barely more than a sigh, a single word carried on a gust of temptation, "Now." I froze, the word echoing in my ears, and everything hung in that fragile instant, the pull, the risk, the desire. Outside, a car passed, its headlights briefly cutting across the interior. Inside, nothing moved except the charged air between us. I knew, in that suspended heartbeat, that whatever happened next would change everything. We had barely drawn back from the edge when the sound of a notification made both of us flinch. My phone vibrated again, lighting up the dashboard. I cursed softly, reaching for it, and froze mid-motion. A new message had appeared, from her. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. The notification preview made my stomach clench. "We need to talk. Now." She noticed my pause and her lips parted, the faintest tremble running through her hand as it brushed against mine. It was barely there, yet it made my heart stutter. I looked at her, eyes searching for explanation, and she finally sighed, a sound heavy with something she hadn't let anyone hear before. "I didn't. I mean, should have told you," she murmured, voice low, almost choking. "About us. About what I've been hiding." I leaned slightly closer, desperate for context, but instinctively she took a step back. The movement was tiny, a fraction of a breath's length, yet it carried a universe of hesitation, shame, and desire all at once. Her eyes, dark and unguarded, held mine like a challenge. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered, fingers brushing my arm as if apologizing and pleading at the same time. "But it turns out I've been lying to myself. And to you." My chest tightened. My hands wanted to find hers, wanted to anchor her, but the tiny step she had taken reminded me of the risk, of the impossibility. I could feel the heat of her skin lingering even in the slight space between us, and it made everything inside me ache. "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew. My voice was low, rough with suppressed urgency. Her gaze flicked away for a moment, and I noticed the faint quiver in her jaw, the way her shoulders tensed, then relaxed ever so slightly. I've felt this way for months," she admitted, voice trembling. "Every time I saw you, every conversation, every brush of your hand, I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it wasn't real. But I can't anymore." I swallowed hard. The car felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker, charged with words we hadn't said before, with truths finally spilling out. I wanted to reach for her, to close that distance she'd created, but the sharp edge of reality, the risks, the age difference, the judgment, kept me frozen. Her fingers grazed mine again, a whisper of contact, electric and fragile. I felt her pulse, felt my own rising to meet it. Her eyes searched mine, begging for acknowledgement, and I realized that despite the fear, despite everything, I wanted to give it. My words faltered. I wanted to tell her I felt the same, but the weight of everything pressed down, her life, my youth, the consequences we hadn't fully considered. My hands trembled, brushing past hers as if testing the line between restraint and surrender. She leaned closer, breath catching, and for a moment, the hesitation that had always held us back seemed to dissolve. Our knees brushed, our shoulders pressed, and I could feel her warmth like a beacon. Yet her eyes held fear, reminding me that desire alone wasn't enough, we needed to choose, or risk everything. "I don't care," I breathed, voice low, reckless. "I don't care what anyone thinks. I just want you. I've wanted you since the first time I saw you." Her lips parted slightly, trembling in response. She leaned just enough that our foreheads nearly touched, the heat of her breath mingling with mine. Every micro-gesture, the brush of fingers, the tilt of her chin, the rise and fall of her chest, spoke louder than words. And then she whispered, barely audible, "Then, we can't wait anymore. Not here, not like this." The words hung between us, a challenge, a promise, a question all at once. My hands itched to close the space, to claim her, but the night outside seemed suddenly alive, watching us, waiting. And in that charged silence, one thought crystallized: whatever happened next would leave nothing the same. We had to decide, and soon. The car felt impossibly small, like the world had shrunk to just the two of us. Every sound, our breathing, the faint hum of the street outside, the rustle of her jacket, was amplified, intimate and urgent. She was inches from me, her shoulder brushing mine, her hair spilling over her arm, brushing my cheek. My hands itched to move, to hold her, but I hesitated, caught between desire and the fear that had always kept us apart. Her eyes met mine, wide, searching, almost trembling with the weight of unspoken confession. "Are you sure?" she whispered, her lips close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath, soft and intoxicating. I swallowed, heart hammering, and nodded. "I am. I don't care about the risk. I don't care about anyone else. I just want this. Want you." A faint laugh, shaky and breathless, escaped her. She leaned just a little closer, and the electricity between us sparked into something unbearable. My hand brushed against hers, lingering this time, and she didn't pull away. Her fingers curved around mine, tentative, searching, as if testing whether I would let go, or pull her closer. Our eyes held, and suddenly, the world outside the car ceased to exist. I noticed every detail, the slight tremor in her jaw, the way her eyelashes caught the dim light, the warmth radiating from her body. She was real, vivid, untouchable until now, and yet here she was, vulnerable and daring, all at once. "I've waited," she murmured, voice barely audible. "More than I should have." Her confession struck me like a pulse through my chest. I wanted to tell her the same, to spill all the thoughts I'd tried to bury, the nights I'd spent imagining this moment. But words weren't enough. I leaned closer, careful, and let my forehead brush against hers. The heat of her skin, the scent of her hair, the soft weight of her body against mine, it was overwhelming. She shivered slightly, and my hand finally moved, cupping her cheek, brushing the hair away from her face. Her eyes closed for a fraction of a second, and I felt her exhale, a tiny sigh that told me she had made the same choice I had. We hovered there, on the edge, suspended between restraint and surrender. My lips were just shy of hers, our breaths mingling, hearts beating in unison. I wanted to close the last fraction of distance, to feel the full weight of her against me, but even in that near kiss, I felt the messy, human truth. Desire was reckless, yes, but it was ours. She whispered my name, soft and breathless, and I felt it vibrate in my chest. That one sound was enough. I leaned in finally, and our lips met, not perfect, not rehearsed, but real, urgent, trembling. It was a kiss of confession, of release, of all the longing and restraint that had built between us. Pulling back just slightly, I rested my forehead against hers, breathless. "I get it now," I murmured. "Everything. I understand you." Her hand stayed in mine, her thumb brushing over my knuckles, and she nodded, voice small and full of emotion. "Me too. I understand you." The tension that had haunted us, the risk, the hesitation, the impossibility, didn't vanish. But it became something else entirely, shared, understood, and no longer a barrier. We had chosen each other. Outside, the city continued on, indifferent. But inside that car, inches apart, hearts still racing, everything had shifted. For the first time, we were fully, undeniably, ours. The city had quieted down, leaving the car bathed in soft, diffused light from the street lamps. Outside, the night felt vast and indifferent, but inside, everything was intimate, contained, ours. We sat side by side, shoulders touching, hands intertwined without thought. No words were necessary, just the warmth, the pulse of proximity, the subtle rhythm of shared breath. She leaned her head lightly against my shoulder, and I felt the gentle weight of her trust pressing against me. It wasn't dramatic or urgent this time, there were no confessions hanging in the air, no teasing, no hesitation. Just presence. I brushed my fingers through her hair, slow and careful, marveling at the way her skin felt under my touch, warm and real. "I still can't believe I began, voice low, but she cut me off with a soft, teasing hum. "Shoo," she whispered, her hand squeezing mine gently. "Let's not ruin it with words." I laughed quietly, the tension of months, the nervousness, the longing, the near misses, finally unraveling. We had crossed the impossible line, stepped into something fragile and real, and it had worked. Her head stayed against my shoulder as I shifted slightly to make her more comfortable, careful not to break the magic of the moment. She tilted her face up just enough for our foreheads to touch, the intimacy quiet, electric, and reassuring all at once. Her breath mingled with mine, her heartbeat a soft echo against my chest. I had wanted this for so long, and now that we were here, it felt more honest than anything I'd ever known. "I was scared," she admitted, voice low. I didn't want to make it wrong." "You didn't," I said softly, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "We didn't. We just found each other." Her lips curved into a small, contented smile, and I felt a thrill at the simplicity of it. No dramatic declarations, no overthinking, just acceptance of what had always been there, waiting for courage to claim it. We had chosen each other, despite fear, despite judgment, despite the impossible odds. We stayed that way for a long while, just breathing together, the hum of the city outside a distant murmur. Every brush of her hand against mine, every soft sigh, every shift in posture carried a depth of connection I hadn't known possible. It was messy, human, and real, and that made it perfect. Finally, she lifted her head slightly, resting her forehead against mine. Her eyes caught mine, soft and tender, and in that glance, I felt every doubt, every hesitation, dissolve completely. I think I could get used to this," she murmured, a quiet laugh bubbling in her throat. "Me too," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of me. "Me too." Her hand found mine again, entwining fingers in a way that was natural, intimate, permanent in its own subtle way. The night stretched on, and for once, the future felt safe, unthreatening, and ours to shape together. We didn't need to speak more. No promises were necessary. The closeness, the shared warmth, the lingering touches spoke louder than any words ever could. We had crossed the line, survived the hesitation, and found something rare: mutual understanding, trust, and the messy perfection of love that was both dangerous and right. Finally, I rested my head against hers, the warmth of her hair brushing my cheek, her hand still held tight in mine. And in that moment, I knew we would face the world together, one quiet heartbeat at a time. 5.